Hello viewers, today I bring you the second part of my belts and alternator job on my 1998 Toyota Corolla, which has a 4A FE model engine. This second video will cover specifics on disassembling and replacing the bearings on the alternator. I will show a disassembly with the goal of replacing the bearings, but you can apply these notions to any sort of issues you may have in the alternator. You may use this disassembly and reassembly procedure to figure out how to take apart your alternator and then buy the parts you need to replace at your local parts shop, which will make for a really very cheaper procedure than just buying a new alternator. So, without further ado, let's begin with this repair. So now I'm removing the wires that go to the alternator. Unplug connector. Now I am applying a bit of WD-40 to the nut in order to remove the pulley. And I will use the traditional strength-based approach only to have the nut strip. Insert a couple of screwdrivers into the interior mechanism. Don't insert them too deep, just get the fan blades, because those blades are really strong, even though they are not designed to do this, but they will do the job. You insert one screwdriver in one hole and hold the blade. You insert another screwdriver into another hole and then just apply your force. Use a lot of WD-40 to moisturize, to lubricate this area, and then just spin the nut, and you will be lucky like I was. And now I can remove the nut and remove the pulley. So now I'm disassembling the alternator. There are 3 bolts, 3 nuts, one here, one here, one here. Then there is a bolt here. And then there is another one here that has this black part here. It is like this, held in place, and then there is a nut. So you have to remove the nut, remove this black part, and then remove the outer cover. Let's start removing the bolts around the center. These are Phillips head bolts. So just remove all the bolts you see. While you are removing the bolts, be very careful not to lose any of them, because they are very small and may be hard to figure out or to find out at your local parts shop if you ever lose one of these bolts. So be very careful when removing them and separating the parts. Now there are 4 more bolts around the alternator that I am removing with the Phillips screwdriver. You can see they hold some rings that connect to that wiring mesh that goes around the alternator casing. Remove these 4 bolts and then remove the top tab. And then there are 4 insulation grommets in red that you have to pull out. They come out easily. Remove them and set them aside, but be careful not to pull too much, because you may damage the wirings that come from the wiring mesh in the alternator. Now make a couple of taps against the hard surface to separate the 2 halves of the alternator. Here I'm checking to see if there is any apparent noise in the bearing. Now you have to remove this securing plate in order to have access to the bigger bearing, which is placed on the outer casing. Be very careful when removing these bolts. Try to apply a strong force in order to remove them on the first try, because if you strip these bolts you will be in a difficult position. Now we have access to the big bearing and we are ready to punch it out.
Hold this half of the alternator in a vise, not by the wires, but by the alternator casing itself. See where it is placed? We have to now punch the bearing out of the casing. This will be better if you had a press. Without a press, that's how you do it. Get the style. So out comes the old bearing. Make a note of the sides which were turned towards each side so that it match the letterings and ensure that the new bearing will be in the same position.
Now to remove the top casing from the interior, from the insides of the alternator, you have to use a bearing puller. I have improvised with the bearing puller that I have used to work on my gearbox and a couple of long threaded shafts. After the outer casing comes out, you have to use a smaller bearing puller to pry out the smaller bearing that is on the opposite side of the big bearing. So just fix your bearing puller and then use a wrench to tighten the bolt, and then in time it will softly and but surely come out without damaging anything. You can see the bearing moving slightly up as the bearing puller does its job, and in the last threads the bearing will snap out. There we have it. Save that ring because you will have to place it over the new bearing. And there is another ring that you just clean up and then place it again. Not to forget to place it before the new bearing. Now an important step before you put the thing back together. You have to straighten up the blades that you most likely have bent when using that screwdriver trick to pull out the bearing, the pulley nut. You see, one of the blades was really bent and it's almost in a 90-degree angle. This is very bad because it will scrape against the outer casing of the alternator if you do not rectify this situation. So go around all the blades and ensure that they are in an appropriate angle. If you do not straighten them, like I was saying, you hear that noise? That is very bad and will be very much noisier when it is running on the car. Now I'm applying a bit of oil on the surfaces to make it easier for the new bearing to slide into place. Not a lot of oil, just a little bit to coat the surfaces. And then insert the bearing as straight as you can, because if you insert it at an angle it will be increasingly hard to tap it into place. Some people will criticize me for doing this, but I'm an amateur mechanic and I don't have a press. Notice as I go around that socket to try to tap it in uniformly. Like I show you here, you may want to switch to a longer, deeper socket as the bearing goes down. Now apply a little bit of sanding to the copper surfaces, not only on the top but also on the bottom. I'm showing here only on the top, but you have to sand the whole copper surface to increase the contact between this shaft and the brushes, which will ensure high conductivity and high efficiency of your alternator. Use a very high grit sandpaper to almost make like a mirror-like polishing. Make it very soft and very flat. Now I am inserting the holding ring on top of the bearing, and to do this I will use a socket. I will apply some gentle taps and evenly around the ring in order for the ring not to bend. Notice as I move the hammer around in order for the ring to go evenly around the shaft. And then after those initial taps, apply a little bit more force to pull it in straight. Now I am sanding the surface of the top casing to remove any debris, any dirt that may have, and corrosion that may have accumulated in that position, that place. This way the top casing will slide much easier. You can see the shiny surface, or much cleaner surface. There will be some remains, but I'm not over sanding this. Now I'm applying a little bit of oil around the bearing and around the case, because we will have to slide the top casing into the place where the bearing is. So a little bit of oil will help and will do wonders. Now preparing the other half of the case to push in the new bearing, the big bearing in this case. Apply a little bit of oil, just a light coat, not a lot. And now I am inserting the new bearing back into its place. Notice as I try to put it as flat as possible and not bent or not flat in any way. Then I use a bit of wood to punch in the new bearing and apply some gentle taps. These first taps are very important, because if you tap on one side and not on the other, the bearing will go in sideways and that will make it impossible to insert the bearing. So try to get a feel for the bearing position and then tap softly during this initial stage. The wood and the soft hammer is very important, because we don't want to damage the bearing as we are putting it in. Now I'm using a larger block of wood. Notice as I move the hammer around and not tap on a single spot. You see, I tap on one side, then on the other, one side and then on the other. You see, this will ensure that the bearing will go in flat and as perfectly as possible. Because I'm working without a press, we have to make compromises.
Now we have to insert the holder plate for the bearing. Match the notches. See one notch there, then one notch there. Or these grommets that you have to match with the notches. So align this and then insert the 4 bolts. these middle bolts is a slightly longer one. This goes in the inner bolt that's closer to this spigot. Now we have to insert the pulley nut. I'm using my trick here. I'll have to recorrect the fan blade's position after tightening this.
After you are done, don't forget to test it out for any scraping or any abnormal noises by spinning around the pulley and listening for any strange issues in the alternator.
I'll go over the fan blades and then tap a little bit on them to push them again down, because when we insert the two screwdrivers they may bend this way and they may scrape against the top. So I'm going to make just some slight taps. Okay. So the alternator spins well without any grinding noises or scraping. So I believe this is ready to go in the car.
Well, I hope these 20 or so minutes of your time were worth it, and if you liked the video, don't forget to give me that thumbs up and maybe subscribe to the channel. That really motivates me to keep making this sort of videos for you to try on your car and maybe save some money. Till the next video, take care, keep your car in top shape and do it DIY style.